that I find to be quite fascinating about the music scene on TikTok, which includes but is not limited to only just metal and goth enjoyers, however, it happens a lot within these communities for some reason, is the way in which you're meant to discover certain bands and certain artists. Guys, you don't understand. You're not like me, somebody who actually grew up listening to Deftones, which means you're not a real fan. You found Bloodhound Gang through TikTok? You mean the app that is based entirely around music? Fortunately for me growing up, I have parents who have impeccable music taste within their own rights. My mum, for example, enjoyed a lot of R&B and rap music, where my dad was more so into heavy metal and rock. Obviously, I lean towards more of my dad's music taste as opposed to my mum's. As, for example, when I was growing up, the way I discovered Korn was not only through my dad, but Coming Undone was one of the most downloaded songs on Beer MP3 at the time. And on my first iPod, that was my first song on the damn thing. Unfortunately for the newer generation of music enjoyers, they don't have the same experience of going into Sanity with their parents buying heaps of CDs that they themselves didn't know what any of them sounded like, because it's not like Apple Music or Spotify existed where you walk into, say, like a more modern day record store and you see a band that you've never heard of before, you whip out Spotify and you're like, is this worth buying? I almost caught myself doing that the other day with a record from the Helicopters when I was in a record store, and I was like, you know, this is $45, so... And I stopped myself in my tracks. I was like, don't do that. Not to mention the fact as well that one of Australia's most popular music stores, or used to be music stores, JB Hi-Fi, it's more of a home appliance center now. How are y'all gonna expect the younger generation to discover new music and more niche bands? Not that, you know, Deftones or Korn are niche bands, but a lot of the JBs that I've been into, I have not seen a lot of metal music. I have not seen more niche bands being stocked. It's really whatever is popular right now is what you'll see in a JB. For example, right, the whole concept of finding new music in person, like just going into a music store and finding CDs or vinyls of bands that you've never heard of before, that kind of culture doesn't really exist as a whole anymore. And it may be different in other countries, and it's not to say that where I live there aren't any music stores. There are so many that I'll pop up on the screen here that I love going to. But let's move on to the shit that you guys really want to hear me say. Some of you just started rocking with Korn because they're trending on TikTok. This was when Y'all Want a Single was every second scroll on the For You page. Some of us been rocking since before cell phones were a thing. So I hate to tell you this, but nobody cares, and here's why. Nu metal is having a massive resurgence as of late, and whilst it's so cool to see the younger generation appreciating a subgenre of music that was considered poser music by a lot of metal elitists at the time, it's also not fun seeing this constant narrative of Korn is becoming popular. Bro, they're one of the most popular metal bands. I don't know what to tell you. You're not so special for being a fan, like Korn is becoming popular again, guys. Oh my god, I need to let everybody know that I was listening to them before they were even born. Like, yes, Rachel, obviously you've been listening to Korn longer than those who were born in 2007, because Rachel, by that time, Korn had already released most of their classics. Hell, I was born not too long before Untouchables came out. Yet, for some reason, we want to whip out this superiority complex on the younger generation. Because why? You feel better than them because you were there in their prime? Like, congratulations, I guess. Do you want a trophy? Do you want a medal? It's just a little weird, in my opinion, when people act this way towards kids and teenagers who were just now discovering a band that they weren't alive for. And the funniest bit is that Korn is still an active band. They are still together. They are still touring. They are still making music. Like, shout out Requiem. Korn's music has aged like the finest wine. One of the best bands in my opinion. I don't care what anyone says. And I mean, of course, Korn was going to have a massive resurgence. They are Korn. Newer nu metal bands aren't really a thing. Something else I want to add as well is how teenagers of almost any generation are going to be obsessed with what came before them. It's interesting, it's different, and it's also completely new to them. For example, when I was a lot younger, I was obsessed with Hole and Nirvana. I was so obsessed with like that grunge era. Like, I should have been born in the 90s. I was so close. And I used to be really cringe about it. Really cringe. I'm talking, I thought like this. It's only a natural thing that is going to happen. And we're currently seeing it at the moment with, you know, the resurgence of 2014 Tumblr fashion and people who are obsessed with like the 2010s internet era. It's just, it's always gonna happen. And I don't know, I just don't really see it as deep that these kids didn't grow up listening to Korn and they're just finding it now. Shouldn't that be a good thing? Shouldn't we be cheering these new fans on as they've made it possible for Korn to still tour, still make music, and still hold up as a nu metal band in current day? I was lucky enough to be able to go to Good Things last year at 23, still 23, seeing Korn. I always hear stories from Gen Xers and millennials of how cool it was to go see Korn at like 16 in their prime. I wish, all right? You are just another fan. It really doesn't matter how long it's been. They're really one of the most popular metal bands. You are not special, bro. The Deftones enjoyer in me leaving when I see a TikTok Deftones fan. So just a really quick question. What makes you any different from a quote unquote TikTok Deftones fan? You are cringe. Anyone who thinks this way is insanely cringe. I always wonder what constitutes as a TikTok fan. Is it the fact that these 13-year-olds only know a couple of songs and they have that in their rotation? Who cares? I don't care what a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old is doing, because you wouldn't actually say this to an adult. That shit just doesn't happen, you know? Because to the band, regardless of how you discovered them, you are just another fan. Yeah, you're the same as a TikTok Deftones fan. Sure, I can't speak for Chino Marino or Stephen Carpenter and how they feel about how long their fans have been with them for. Deftones is another one of those nu metal bands that have been popular. They have over 10 million monthly listeners on Spotify, with songs garnering hundreds of millions of streams. You are not different or special at all that your dad played Deftones in the car on the way to school every single morning. You know what my dad did too? He too was playing some heat, some absolute bangers. But the thing is, it doesn't make me any more of a fan of a band just because I grew up on that. And also, just in general, nobody cares. You know, and if you do really care super hard about this shit, like what constitutes as a TikTok fan and a real fan, you need a life. And this brings me to my next point, right? I was having such an interesting conversation about the way people choose to interact with music with my boyfriend the other day, because we interact with music two completely different ways. For example, if I hear a new band and I'm like, whoa, this song is really good, I am gonna go and I'm gonna find their entire discography and I'm going to consume every single song. But my boyfriend, he's not really like that. He will come across a few songs of a band and claim himself to be a fan. But, you know, I claim myself to be a fan because I've listened to, say, an artist's entire discography and I'm like, you know, maybe I don't like this, but I love this. And so the way people choose to interact with music doesn't make them any less of a fan just because they're not, you know, quote, as big of a fan as you, or they found them on TikTok, or they didn't discover it the right way. Like, what is the right way you want people to discover music these days. I can somewhat understand when you have one of those songs that you've held so close to your heart for so many years and all of a sudden you hear it all the time on TikTok and now it's, ruining that experience for you. Be a little sad about it, be a little emo or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's TikTok. If you don't want to hear it, if you don't want to see it, delete the app. You don't need to be out here naming the lead singer's cousin's, grandmother's, cat's favorite kibble brand, or knowing every single song that said artist or band has ever made, even the really terrible ones that you force yourself to like, otherwise you don't consider yourself an actual fan of that band. Social media has certainly helped music expand its audiences, but this superiority complex people hold because they make a band their entire identity for whatever reason is quite honestly one of the worst things social media did in terms of being a fan of music. You only really ever heard this kind of shit come from the mouths of misogynistic, sad, pathetic, lonely males. All these teens on TikTok listening to Deftones don't have any idea, lol. Being a legit fan since the 90s when Chino had dreads. Again, being a legit fan doesn't mean that you have had to be there from the very beginning. It's simply supporting that band by the means of buying their records, streaming their music, telling your friends how awesome they are, buying their merchandise and repping it like you're a soldier for these guys. Do not let people like this make you feel any less of a legit fan all because you haven't been there from the very get. Like, how were your parents supposed to know that they should have met each other when they were 12 and had you? Like, no, that's stupid and gross and dumb. Just to be a early Deftones fan. That's how stupid y'all sound. For these kinds of bands to still be relevant today is awesome, and I really hate the fact that a lot of these younger metal fans are constantly having to cop it left, right, and center. Older people telling the younger generations that they aren't a legit fan because they weren't alive in the 90s to experience that band in their prime and from their formation at that. Or weird-ass people my age pose the checking 13-year-olds all because they know a few songs. How about this, poser checkers? I only know a couple of Deftones songs as well. Like, I don't know their entire discography because I really don't care. You are not different from anybody else who listens to metal, okay? Just because that's all you listen to and you don't broaden your horizons and you feel superior to other people because you're so edgy, like, yuck, cringe, cunt. Listening to some of your favorite bands before they got popular on TikTok, but people think you got them from TikTok. Who actually gives the fattest, largest, obese fuck? Genuinely! Oh no! People think that you might have discovered a band from TikTok, the app that's entirety of its being is based around audio, more specifically music. Oh my god, no way! People are discovering bands from TikTok. That is such a crime. It's so cringe because, you didn't grow up with them. You came from a household that probably thought that it was devil music. Like, people don't understand that it's not that serious. Really isn't. If dumb-ass Richard and dumb-ass Rachel think that I discovered Korn through TikTok, I really don't care. That's none of my business. Stupid opinions have nothing to do with me. I do not care in the slightest. I don't take that kind of shit personally because simply I didn't, and it doesn't matter even if I did. I would absolutely hate to be a teenager during times like these. Like, everybody's so judgmental. Nobody can keep their dirty ass mouth shut. And the fact that the younger generation feels so ashamed because they found a band through TikTok, really, it deeply saddens me because you don't know how many people you're just gonna turn away from the community, all because they found a band through TikTok. I could not care less. Anybody's opinions on where you discovered music from is useless information that shouldn't concern you, period. Y'all make it sound like discovering music from a music-based app is cringe when it's not. Shout out Aberdeen is Dead and Moon Rules Apply. Two of my most favorite bands that I have discovered through TikTok. And without TikTok, I don't know if I would know any of them. Because you've also got to remember too, that with a lot of these smaller, more niche bands, right? They're not having their work being turned into physical media. And that sucks, you know, because I love holding things. I love having that tangible, you know, I like it in my hands. So, you know, in that sense, it does suck, sure, that we're not really having that being done anymore on a larger scale. And streaming services are a part of the problem, sure, but I'm sorry, I do not care about a literal tween teenager discovering music on a music-based app. Like, you're really cringe for being so upset about that. I'm not ashamed or afraid to admit that I discover music sometimes on TikTok because, you know, it really doesn't matter. Finding music through a non-traditional platform is not a negative thing, and the fact that people have made it a bad thing is so laughable to me because aren't you too on TikTok? Why exactly are you on TikTok if you think it's so cringe for 13-year-olds to discover new music that they've never heard of before? My hope for the next generation is, with all of the bands and the music they're currently discovering at the moment, they're inspired to create bands of their own and keep this genre alive for as long as possible. And if it dies out because y'all were pointing fingers at people for discovering music on a music-based app, I hate y'all! The difference between me and you is I grew up on this music and you've learned it through TikTok as divorced dad rock. Fella, be so real with me. Who the is calling Korn divorced dad rock? Yes, Korn was in the background of this TikTok. That was actually the most surprising part about it. I mean, again, who in this large spinny bowl full of 7 billion cunts cares? Go back to putting your willy in the exhaust pipe, mate. You're embarrassing and you're annoying. Seeing my favorite dystopia song on TikTok makes me feel that creeping, crawling urge to violently gatekeep. I fear that my favorite bands will become what Deftones has become on this app: a label, a personality trait, manipulator music, all feeding a growing sewage of annoying brain rotten influenced tween. If somebody already has these kind of like preconceived notions of what kind of person you are due to the fact that you listen to a particular band, that's low IQ behavior. Why do you care about that? Genuinely, I don't know why people care so much about this shit. I have so many bands on the wall right here that have a lot of stigma attached to them. Like, if you listen to this, it's female manipulator music. If you listen to this, you're this, that, and third. Like, I'm not any of those things, so I'm not going to take on any of those labels. Simple as that. There are so many people who enjoy Deftones who aren't manipulators. Now what? I am aware that even dystopia listeners have a stigma attached to them now, all based on the actions of a few. It always happens, always. I don't know why people are so stupid that they cannot realize the patterns that are constantly coming up. Oh, you know, you have a few bad apples, that means the whole bunch is But unfortunately, with listening to music like dystopia, it is always going to have somewhat of a stigma attached to it. That has, you know, that's what the genre of music has always kind of like, not necessarily invited, but has attracted in a sense. Dystopia is a sludge metal crust punk band. Of course, there are going to be cringe cunts who are obsessed with their stuff. I'm judging people based on the actions that they present, not who I think they are. And I hate to say it too, but this band, they have dark themed lyrics. You know, of course it's going to attract maybe some unsavory people. That's not to say that there aren't a whole bunch of nice, kind-hearted, generally good person who are attracted to this kind of music too, but it's just a little strange to care that much. You know what? I don't know if I'm articulating this well enough, because I just look at shit like this and I don't care. But to fear that a band that has long been broken up is becoming popular on TikTok is going to destroy your sense of self is a little insane. And not to mention the fact that the shit that was said in that TikTok is so online. You know, I don't think of every Radiohead listener ever as a manipulative piece of shit. No, you have to present to me you're a manipulative piece of shit. I don't care what you listen to, because then you're kind of taking the same route of, you know, what school music they're into. And suddenly this artist is absolutely terrible, even though they have no themes of that whatsoever. They don't stand for that shit. But someone who is a shit cunt is a fan of this band, and now their reputation is destroyed because so-and-so. I'm not gonna feed into that. I'm not gonna give into that shit. I think if you like Deftones, I don't really think of it because, you know, I don't really care. Your actions will show me what kind of person you are, not really the music you listen to. So with all of that being said, everybody, have you ever had any experience before where you have been called cringe because you weren't alive during the time that a band formed and was in their prime for, and now you're suddenly a fan because they're getting popular? Have you ever been called out because you're a TikTok fan? You know, weird as how people act when it comes to discovering new music online. But I just wanted to thank you all so much for coming out today to Yappersville. I really appreciate having you here every time, and thank you so much for just listening to me go on and on and on. I hope this video is going to help a lot of people out there to not feel any shame for discovering music on a music-based app. I'm not sure why you guys are having shame for that, because you're acting like it's a bad thing and you're doing something bad to somebody. If someone shames you or calls you out for that, spin, rotate, suck on it. Take care of yourselves, and most of all, love your fucking selves.